Hey folks, David Thomas Tao with VinePair.com, and it's a really special day because I am drinking Thomas H. Handy Cask Strength Kentucky Rye. This is the Cask Strength Rye in the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. It is between 6 and 7 years old. This year's expression is 124.9 proof, so it's about 9 proof points below last year's release. I love Thomas H. Handy. A lot of people are like, oh, it's only a 6-year rye. That's fine. I don't care how old it is. It's normally delicious. I'm gonna look at this rye, I'm gonna review it. My full review, where I go much more in depth, is at the link in the description below. I actually reviewed all of this year's Buffalo Trace Antique Collection for VinePair. Stick around, we're gonna drink some whiskey, but before we get into that, make sure you subscribe to VinePair on YouTube. I'm asking very, very nicely. All right, let's talk pricing and availability, which is like the hardest part of talking about the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. Buffalo Trace increased the suggested retail price from about $100 to about $125 this year. If you see this on a shelf for $125, give yourself a high five and then purchase it, because it is very tough to find this for suggested retail. It's not Buffalo Trace's fault, by the way. We have a 3-tier system in American Spirits. The actual distillery doesn't really get to dictate what these sit on shelves or the secondary market for. That being said, I have seen this for as high as $900 on a retail shelf. I do live in New York City, so everything is expensive, including sandwiches and high-end whiskey. But if you are able to find this for close to MSRP, normally a good call. This is normally one of my favorites. I spent a lot of time with this whiskey. I spent like an hour, I'm not kidding, with this whiskey trying to pick out a lot of notes. So you're just getting the cursory take here. Funky Fresh Citrus, okay? That is a terrible album title, but it's what I get here. There is like zested orange, lemon peel, grapefruit, zested citrus with a little bit of funk. I get like furniture polish and pine sol on this, on the nose. That's not a bad thing. I got some angry texts when this was published, I'm not gonna lie. And they're like, why are you saying Handy smells like chemicals? Well, first off, everything is chemicals. Alcohol is a chemical, okay? This is all chemicals. We're tasting chemicals here. Everything we eat, everything we drink is a chemical. Anyway, water is a chemical. Furniture polish and like pine cleaning solution are prominent on the nose. That is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just what I smell here. For me, I really like this nose. It was a little more timid than last year's. It smelled a little less hot. Not necessarily a bad thing. This is this really interesting, like pumpernickel rye bread. It is a rye, so that makes sense. That is so bready. Rye bread. I can almost taste corned beef because that's normally what I eat with rye bread, but very bready, and that transitions into those citrus and fruity notes. For me, not a terribly herbal rye. Plenty of rye spice, baking spice, cloves, anise, peppercorns. It's all behind that rye bread, but it's like a rye bread with zested orange peel in it. That'd actually be really good. Has anyone made that? Like rye bread with zested orange peel? That'd be delicious. This isn't as intensely spicy as Thomas Handy often is. For me, this only got slightly edged out by this year's Sazerac 18, but it was super close. I gave this 94 points out of 100. I really enjoyed this. Not the best Thomas Handy I've had, and I think I probably docked it just a little bit compared to last year's because it didn't quite have that punch, and the finish didn't really linger with me as long as I often look for from Thomas H. Handy. But I really enjoyed it. It is one of the more accessible releases in the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. I do tend to find this most years. I do get lucky enough to get a bottle most years, not always. And I will be looking out this year. A very tasty rye, 94 points. Would drink this every day if I could, to be honest with you. So there you have it, my review of this year's Thomas H. Handy for the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. Weirdly, not my favorite rye this year. Sazerac 18 was out of the collection, but you can read my full review and my rankings of all this year's Buffalo Trace Antique Collection at the link in the description below. Until then, I'm David Thomas Tao, drinking the whiskey so you can too. That's gonna be a new catchphrase. Thanks for tuning in.